Do you think you can outsmart this court, young lady? Judge William Simmons leaned forward, his voice heavy with authority. The entire courtroom was silent, eyes locked on the black teenager standing before him. She didn't flinch. Her deep brown eyes held steady, calm yet calculating. I don't need to outsmart the court, Your Honor, she said, her voice smooth, almost amused. Truth is truth. A lie is a lie. It's all about how you ask the right question. The judge narrowed his eyes. Then let's play a game, shall we? Truth or lie? If you're as smart as you think, prove it right here, right now. A ripple of gasps and murmurs spread through the room. The assistant district attorney smirked, thinking this was about to be an easy win. The courtroom officer shifted uncomfortably. The girl's public defender gulped. But she smiled. And that was the moment everything changed. Just 2 weeks earlier, 17-year-old Nova Daniels had been sitting in the back of her AP Law class, staring out the window, daydreaming about the future. She had always been different from the other kids in her neighborhood. A thinker, a strategist, someone who read law textbooks for fun. Miss Daniels, her teacher, Mr. Whitmore, called. Care to enlighten the class with your opinion? Nova blinked and turned her attention back to the classroom. About what? She asked, tucking one of her braids behind her ear. The ethics of plea bargains. Are they just, or are they simply a tool for the powerful? Nova leaned forward, her fingers tracing the edge of her notebook. It depends on who's holding the power, she said. Plea bargains help people who can afford good lawyers. But for people who can't, it's like being handed a loaded deck in a card game you never asked to play. A few of her classmates chuckled, while others nodded in agreement. Mr. Whitmore smiled. Excellent perspective, as always. It was moments like these that made Nova feel like she had a purpose. She wanted to change the system, to help those who didn't understand the rules of the game. But she never imagined she'd be thrown into that very system herself. The incident that led her here happened fast. Nova had been walking home from school when she heard shouting near the corner store. A fight had broken out between two older boys. She didn't know them, but she knew the look in their eyes, the kind of anger that came from a life where every day was a battle. One of them threw a punch. The other dodged and reached for something in his pocket. A gun. Nova's instincts kicked in. She lunged, grabbing the boy's wrist before he could pull the trigger. The gun clattered to the ground. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the cops. By the time they arrived, the scene was chaos. And just like that, everything spiraled. The officers saw a black teenager near a gun. They saw her standing over two boys, one holding his bleeding nose, the other wide-eyed in shock. Hands up. Nova had frozen, her pulse pounding. Wait, get down. Now. She was shoved to the ground, handcuffs locking around her wrists. The metal bit into her skin. I was trying to stop them, she tried to explain, but it didn't matter. The officers didn't ask questions. And that was how Nova Daniels found herself in juvenile court, facing a charge that wasn't hers to bear. Her public defender, a man who looked like he hadn't won a case in years, barely spoke to her before the hearing. Look, kid, you don't have a record. Just take the deal. Community service, 6 months probation. It's better than the alternative. Nova stared at him. The alternative? I didn't do anything. Doesn't matter, he sighed. It's your word against the police report. She clenched her fists. Then I'll defend myself. The lawyer laughed. That's not how it works. Nova's jaw tightened. Watch me. And now, standing in front of Judge Simmons, she was about to do just that. The judge tapped his fingers against his desk, watching her. Tell me, Miss Daniels, are you saying you know the law better than your own attorney? Nova met his gaze. I'm saying I know the truth better than anyone in this room. The judge raised a brow. Then let's see if you can prove it. We'll play truth or lie. Another murmur spread through the courtroom. No one had ever seen anything like this. The judge leaned back in his chair. First question. You claim you were stopping a fight. But according to the police report, you were in possession of a firearm. Truth or lie? Nova took a breath. She had one shot at this. Lie, she said firmly. The firearm was never in my possession. It belonged to one of the boys involved in the fight. The officers saw me standing near it and assumed the worst. The judge studied her. Interesting. But if you were only stopping the fight, why didn't you call the police yourself? Nova's eyes darkened. Because in my neighborhood, when the police show up, people like me don't get the benefit of the doubt. Silence. Even the courtroom officer looked away, his expression unreadable. Judge Simmons tapped his chin. Fair point. But let's dig deeper. You said the gun was never yours. That means there should be fingerprints to prove it. Truth or lie? Nova smiled. Truth. For the first time, the judge's expression faltered. Nova glanced toward the prosecution. I'd like to request forensic evidence on the gun. If it was mine, my prints should be on it. But they won't be. The assistant district attorney shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't expected her to be this sharp. Judge Simmons exhaled. Well, Miss Daniels. You've certainly made this interesting. Nova tilted her head. Isn't that the point of the game? The room was thick with tension. No one knew what would happen next. But one thing was clear. Nova Daniels was no ordinary defendant. And she wasn't going down without a fight. Just as the judge opened his mouth to speak, the door to the courtroom swung open. A woman rushed in, her face pale. She held a folder in her hands. Your Honor, she called, breathless. You need to see this. Now. And just like that, everything changed again. Judge Simmons turned toward the woman who had just burst into the courtroom. The entire room tensed. Even Nova, as confident as she was, felt her stomach twist. Who was she? What was in that folder? The judge frowned. Who are you? Assistant forensic analyst, Your Honor, the woman said, stepping forward. She adjusted her glasses, looking directly at the judge. I have critical evidence related to this case. Judge Simmons exchanged a glance with the prosecution, then nodded. Approach. Nova's heart pounded as the woman handed over the folder. The judge flipped it open, his sharp blue eyes scanning the contents. The silence in the courtroom stretched, thick with anticipation. Then, his expression changed. His jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to Nova, then back at the papers. He shut the folder with a sharp snap. Well, he said slowly, his voice unreadable. It seems this case is more complicated than I thought. The prosecutor shifted. Your Honor, what exactly? Judge Simmons held up a hand. We'll get to that in a moment. First, I want to continue our game. The audience murmured. Even the courtroom officer gave the judge a confused look. But Nova? Nova smiled. The game wasn't over yet. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Daniels, earlier you stated that if forensic evidence was examined, it would prove the firearm didn't belong to you. Truth or lie? Nova didn't hesitate. Truth. Judge Simmons' eyes locked onto hers. Then, very deliberately, he tapped the folder. You're right, he said. Your fingerprints are not on the weapon. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Nova's public defender's mouth actually fell open. But before she could celebrate, the judge raised a hand, silencing the noise. However, he said, his voice lowering, that doesn't mean you're in the clear just yet. The tension snapped back into the room like a rubber band. Nova clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. What do you mean? She asked. The judge leaned forward. There are still questions to be answered, Miss Daniels. And I intend to get to the bottom of them. 2 weeks earlier, Nova had been walking home, her backpack slung over one shoulder, when she heard the commotion near the corner store. The argument between the two boys had started over something small, something stupid. But Nova had seen enough fights to know when things were about to turn deadly. She'd acted on instinct, rushing forward just as one of the boys reached for the gun. Her hands had wrapped around his wrist before he could lift it. She hadn't been thinking about what it looked like. She hadn't been thinking about the consequences. And when the police arrived, it was her they focused on. The moment she was thrown into the back of the police car, she knew she was in trouble. At the station, they barely listened to her side of the story. The officers didn't care that she had no criminal record, no history of violence. To them, she was just another black teenager in the wrong place at the wrong time. You're lucky this is your first offense, one officer had said, shaking his head. Take the deal. Move on. But Nova had refused. She knew the system, and she knew it wasn't built to protect people like her. So she did what she always did. She studied. Every night in juvenile detention, she devoured law books, memorized court procedures, and dissected case studies. If no one else was going to fight for her, she'd fight for herself. And now, standing in front of Judge Simmons, she was ready. The judge drummed his fingers against his desk. I have another question for you, Miss Daniels. Let's continue our game. Nova crossed her arms. Go ahead. Do you know who the gun belonged to? She hesitated. She did know. She had seen his face, saw the fear in his eyes when the police took her instead of him. She could say his name, but doing that wasn't her. I know who had the gun, she said carefully. But I also know he didn't mean to use it. He was scared, just like I was. Judge Simmons studied her. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving, she said. The judge's mouth twitched, almost like he was impressed. Interesting choice. The prosecutor sighed, rubbing his temples. Your Honor, we don't have time for games. The fact remains. But before he could finish, the doors burst open again. This time, it wasn't a forensic analyst. It was a boy. The same boy who had held the gun that day. The courtroom erupted into whispers. Nova's heart stopped. What was he doing here? The boy stepped forward, his hands shaking. He looked right at Judge Simmons. Then, his voice barely above a whisper, he said, "She didn't do anything. It was me." The entire courtroom froze. Judge Simmons sat back, steepling his fingers. Well, he murmured. Things just got very interesting. The courtroom was dead silent. Nova stared at the boy who had just walked in. She knew him. His name was Jaden. He was from the neighborhood, a kid who had seen more struggle in 17 years than some people did in a lifetime. But she never expected him to come forward. Jaden's hands were shaking, his eyes darting to the judge, then to Nova. He looked terrified. Judge Simmons leaned forward. Son, do you understand what you're saying? Jaden swallowed hard. Yes, sir. His voice cracked, but he stood his ground. The gun was mine. Nova didn't touch it. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was trying to stop me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Nova's chest tightened. She had spent the past 2 weeks preparing to defend herself, knowing that no one was coming to help her. And now, just when she thought she had to do this alone, Jaden showed up. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Judge Simmons held up a hand. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. His piercing blue eyes landed back on Jaden. Why are you coming forward now? Jaden hesitated, glancing at Nova. Because she saved my life. Murmurs spread through the room. Nova blinked. Jaden, you don't. I do. He interrupted, his voice firmer now. I messed up. I got into a fight, and I reached for something I never should have had in the first place. Nova stopped me, and she got arrested for it. Judge Simmons rubbed his chin, deep in thought. That's quite the confession, son. Jaden nodded. I know, and I'm ready to face whatever comes. Nova felt like she couldn't breathe. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had been ready to fight for herself, to use logic and strategy to get the truth out. But Jaden, he was risking everything. The judge tapped his fingers on the bench. Miss Daniels, you're quite the puzzle. First, you insist you weren't guilty. Now, someone else is claiming responsibility. Tell me, if you were in my seat, what would you do next? Nova's mind raced. She knew the law, but she also knew people. She took a deep breath. I'd ask why a kid like Jaden had a gun in the first place. The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Simmons raised an eyebrow. And what would your answer be? Nova turned to Jaden. Why did you have it? Jaden hesitated. His shoulders slumped. For protection, he muttered. It's not like I wanted it. But where we live, sometimes you don't have a choice. Nova nodded. She understood. More than anyone in that courtroom ever could. Judge Simmons sighed, rubbing his temples. This is a mess, he muttered. The prosecutor cleared his throat. Your Honor, this confession doesn't change the fact that Miss Daniels was found at the scene and resisted arrest. Resisted arrest? Nova snapped. I was thrown to the ground before I could say a word. Judge Simmons gave the prosecutor a sharp look. Mr. Caldwell, I suggest you choose your arguments carefully. The prosecutor went pale. Nova swallowed hard. This wasn't just about her anymore. Jaden had put himself on the line. She had to do something. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, Jaden shouldn't have had that gun. But the fact that he felt like he needed one, that's the real problem. Judge Simmons studied her, his expression unreadable. Nova took a step forward. This isn't just about me. It's about all the kids in our neighborhood who think carrying a gun is the only way to survive. You want the truth? The truth is, we don't trust the system because the system doesn't trust us. The room was deadly quiet. Even the courtroom officer looked uncomfortable. Judge Simmons leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the bench. Miss Daniels, you are either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. Nova tilted her head. Why not both? A small smirk twitched at the corner of the judge's mouth. But it disappeared just as quickly. Very well, he said. I'll take all of this into consideration. But for now, this court is in recess. We'll reconvene tomorrow, and I expect to have answers by then. With a bang of his gavel, the session was over. Nova exhaled, her heart pounding. But just as she thought things were calming down, the courtroom doors burst open again. This time, it wasn't a forensic analyst. It wasn't Jaden. It was a man in a suit, his face cold as stone. And the moment Nova saw him, she knew this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The man in the suit strode into the courtroom like he owned the place. His presence alone sucked the air out of the room. His sharp gray eyes scanned everyone before landing on Judge Simmons. "Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth and calculated. "I need a word." Judge Simmons studied him. "And you are?" "Matthew Keaton, State Attorney's Office." He turned his cold gaze to Nova. "I'm here about her." Nova's stomach twisted, but she didn't look away. She had seen men like him before. Powerful, untouchable, the kind who thought they controlled everything. Judge Simmons frowned. "Mr. Keaton, this is highly unusual." Keaton's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Unusual cases require unusual measures, don't they?" He turned back to Nova. "Miss Daniels, I've been following this case closely. And I must say, you're quite the interesting young lady." Nova didn't respond. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Keaton smirked. "I have an offer." Nova's pulse quickened. "What kind of offer?" Keaton stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You drop all this nonsense, this game, and take the deal we originally offered. No trial, no fight, just community service, 6 months probation. Easy." Nova's fists clenched. "I didn't do anything." Keaton's eyes darkened. "And yet, here you are." The weight of his words pressed against her. It wasn't a threat, not exactly, but it was close. Judge Simmons tapped his gavel against his desk. "Mr. Keaton, if you have something to say it properly." Keaton straightened, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, we have no interest in dragging this case out. The state is willing to be generous. But if Miss Daniels insists on taking this to trial, we will pursue the maximum penalty." Nova's blood ran cold. Maximum penalty? She was only 17. This was her first offense. And yet, Keaton was treating her like a criminal. Her public defender cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, if I may." Nova cut him off. "No." Everyone turned to her. She lifted her chin, looking Keaton dead in the eyes. "I won't take the deal." Keaton's smirk faded. "You should think carefully, Miss Daniels. Because if this goes to trial, you'll be facing real consequences. Not just community service. I'm talking about time behind bars." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had spent the past 2 weeks preparing for this fight. But hearing it said so plainly, so casually, made her chest tighten. Still, she refused to back down. "I'm innocent," she said, her voice strong. "And I won't admit to something I didn't do." Keaton's jaw twitched. Judge Simmons sighed. "Mr. Keaton, you've made your position clear. We'll resume tomorrow. Until then, this case is adjourned." He banged the gavel. The moment court was dismissed, Nova felt her knees threaten to buckle. Jaden grabbed her arm. "You okay?" She nodded, even though she wasn't sure. "Yeah, just tired." Jaden frowned. "Keaton's not messing around." "I know." He hesitated. "You sure about this?" "About fighting it." Nova looked at him. "If I take the deal, it means I'm guilty. And I'm not." Jaden sighed. "I wish I was as brave as you." She smiled weakly. "I wish I wasn't so used to being scared." Just then, Keaton brushed past them, his voice low and sharp. "You should have taken the deal, kid." Then he was gone. And for the first time, doubt crept into Nova's mind. Because now, she wasn't just fighting to prove her innocence. She was fighting against a system that wanted to see her fail. And she had no idea if she could win. But she had to try. She would try. Because if she didn't fight for herself, who would? The next day, everything would change. And Nova Daniels had no idea just how dangerous things were about to get. The next morning, Nova barely touched her breakfast. Her stomach was twisted in knots, her mind replaying every moment from court the day before. Keaton's words haunted her. "You should have taken the deal, kid." She wasn't stupid. She knew what that meant. He wasn't going to play fair. He was going to come at her with everything he had. And yet, here she was, still fighting. She arrived at the courthouse with Jaden by her side. His presence was the only thing keeping her grounded. "You ready?" he asked. "Not even a little," she admitted. Jaden gave her a half smile. "Well, if it helps. I think you're kinda amazing." Nova huffed a laugh. "You're just saying that because I didn't snitch on you." "Yeah," he teased. "That too." They stepped into the courtroom, and instantly, Nova's nerves tripled. The energy in the room was different today. The air was thick, like something was about to happen. And then she saw him. Keaton was already there, standing near the prosecution's table, speaking in hushed tones with another lawyer. But when he spotted Nova, he smirked. It sent a chill down her spine. Judge Simmons entered moments later. The room stood, then sat as he took his seat. "Let's get to it," he said. "Mr. Keaton, does the prosecution have any new evidence to present?" Keaton's smirk widened. "We do, Your Honor." Nova stiffened. Keaton gestured to the doors. "If the court allows, I'd like to call a surprise witness." The room murmured. Judge Simmons frowned. "That's highly irregular. Who is the witness?" The doors swung open, and Nova felt her blood run cold. Her mother walked in. Nova's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't seen her mother in months. Not since she disappeared without a word, leaving Nova to fend for herself. And now here she was, walking into a courtroom, as a witness for the prosecution. Nova's head spun. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Judge Simmons looked just as surprised. "And what exactly does Miss Daniels' mother have to do with this case?" Keaton clasped his hands behind his back. "She has critical information about her daughter's character, Your Honor. Information that will show the true nature of the defendant." Nova's hands curled into fists. He was trying to discredit her, trying to make her look like a criminal before she even had a chance to fight back. Judge Simmons sighed. "Proceed." Keaton smiled. "Thank you, Your Honor." He turned to Nova's mother. "Please state your name for the record." She hesitated, glancing at Nova before speaking. "My name is Monique Daniels." Keaton nodded. "And you are Nova's biological mother, correct?" "Yes." "How well do you know your daughter, Miss Daniels?" A long pause. Then, her mother's voice was soft. "Not as well as I should." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Nova's heart pounded. What was she doing? Keaton's expression didn't change. "Miss Daniels, have you ever known your daughter to be involved in criminal activity before?" Her mother swallowed hard. Then, she nodded. The courtroom erupted. Nova felt like the floor had been ripped from beneath her. "No," she thought. "This isn't happening. This isn't real." Judge Simmons banged his gavel. "Order. Order in the court." Keaton waited for the room to settle before turning back to Monique Daniels. "Would you care to elaborate?" Her mother looked at Nova again. Pain flashed in her eyes. And then, she spoke the words that shattered Nova's world. "My daughter is a liar." Gasps filled the air. Nova couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. She just sat there, frozen, as her own mother destroyed her in front of the entire courtroom. Judge Simmons rubbed his temple. "Miss Daniels, you do realize the weight of your statement?" Her mother hesitated. I just mean, Nova has always been smart. Too smart. She knows how to twist things, how to make people believe her. She's good at getting out of trouble." Nova felt sick. Keaton turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, this testimony speaks for itself. The defendant has a history of deception." Nova shot to her feet. "That's a lie." Judge Simmons knocked his gavel. "Sit down, Miss Daniels." Nova's hands were shaking. She turned to her mother. "Why are you doing this?" Her mother's eyes glistened. But she didn't answer. Keaton smirked. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Simmons sighed. "Does the defense wish to cross-examine?" Nova's public defender hesitated, but Nova stood before he could say anything. "I do," she said firmly. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Miss Daniels, I strongly advise you." But Nova wasn't listening. She turned to her mother. "You say I'm a liar," she said. "Tell me, when was the last time you even saw me?" Her mother's lips parted, but no words came out. "Where have you been for the past 6 months?" Nova pressed. More silence. Nova's voice trembled with rage. "You left me. You left me. And now, you come back just to stand against me in court?" Her mother's face twisted in pain. "Nova." "No," Nova snapped. "You don't get to act like you care now." The courtroom was completely silent. Nova turned to Judge Simmons. "Your Honor, how is this relevant? My mother hasn't been in my life for months. She doesn't know who I am. How can her words be trusted?" The judge let out a slow breath. "Mr. Keaton, I'm inclined to agree. Unless you have more substantial evidence, this testimony does little to prove guilt in this case." Keaton's jaw tightened. Judge Simmons tapped his gavel. "The witness is dismissed." Nova's mother flinched like she'd been slapped. She looked at Nova one last time, then turned and walked out of the courtroom. Nova felt her chest tighten, but she forced herself to stay strong. Keaton sat down, his face unreadable. Judge Simmons rubbed his temples. "We're done for today. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Nova didn't move. Jaden placed a hand on her shoulder. "Nova." She closed her eyes. She had prepared for Keaton's tricks. She had prepared for a fight, but she hadn't prepared for this. For her own mother to betray her. And now? Now, she wasn't sure if she could keep going. But she had to. Because if she gave up now, Keaton would win. And she couldn't let that happen. Nova sat frozen in her chair long after Judge Simmons had left the bench. The courtroom emptied around her, people murmuring about what had just happened. She could still hear her mother's words echoing in her head. My daughter is a liar. She had thought she was ready for anything Keaton threw at her. She had prepared for legal tricks, intimidation, even false evidence. But she hadn't prepared for this. She hadn't prepared for betrayal. Jaden touched her arm gently. Nova, he said softly, we should go. Nova clenched her jaw. I need a minute. Her public defender sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, kid, I won't lie. That was bad. Keaton played dirty. But you held your ground. She barely heard him. Her mother, her own mother had sat there and let Keaton use her. For what? Money? A deal of her own? Or had she really believed what she said? Nova didn't know which was worse. Jaden gave her a look. Come on, let's get some air. She let him pull her up, her legs feeling shaky beneath her. As they stepped outside, the cool air hit her like a slap. She hadn't even realized she was shaking. Jaden stuffed his hands in his pockets. So what now? Nova swallowed hard. She felt drained, like Keaton had sucked all the fight out of her in one move. I don't know, she admitted. Jaden frowned. That's not the Nova I know. She shot him a look. Look, I get it, he said. That was messed up. But Keaton wants you to give up. That's his plan. If you stop fighting, he wins. Nova took a shaky breath. I know. Jaden hesitated. You think your mom did it for money? Nova's stomach twisted. I don't know. I don't even know who she is anymore. Jaden didn't push. Instead, he looked at her with something close to admiration. You're stronger than this, he said. Stronger than him. Keaton's scared of you. That's why he's playing dirty. Nova let those words sink in. Keaton was scared of her. Because she wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be fighting back. She was supposed to take the deal. Accept the system's judgment. But she hadn't. And now, Keaton was throwing everything at her. She exhaled slowly. I'm not quitting. Jaden grinned. That's more like it. But just as she started to feel like she could breathe again, her phone buzzed. A text. From an unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. You should have taken the deal. You won't like what happens next. Her blood ran cold. Jaden saw the look on her face. What is it? She showed him the screen. His eyes darkened. Nova, someone's threatening you. Her hands trembled as she stared at the message. She thought she had already seen the worst of what Keaton could do. But now she realized. The real fight was just beginning. Nova's fingers tightened around her phone as she reread the message. You should have taken the deal. You won't like what happens next. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't let fear win. Jaden leaned in closer, his jaw clenched. That's not just a threat, Nova. That's a warning. Nova exhaled slowly. I know. Who sent it? Jaden asked. Nova shook her head. No name. Just an unknown number. Jaden cursed under his breath. You think it's Keaton? Nova didn't know. It was possible. But Keaton didn't seem like the type to threaten. He played the system. He used power, not fear. This felt personal. Either way, she said, locking her phone. I'm not backing down. Jaden gave her a wary look. Nova, whoever sent this wants me scared. They want me to mess up. If I show them I'm scared, they win. Jaden sighed. You're way too good at this game. Nova smirked. I don't play games. I win them. Jaden chuckled, but his expression was still tight with worry. We should tell someone. Nova hesitated. If she told her public defender, he'd probably tell her to take the deal and avoid making things worse. If she told Judge Simmons, it might just make Keaton double down on whatever he was planning. And the police? She had zero trust in them. No, she finally said. Not yet. Jaden frowned. Nova, if something happens, then we go to the judge. But right now, it's just a text. Jaden didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. Fine, he muttered. But if anything else happens, you tell me first. Got it. Nova nodded. Got it. She thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. That night, Nova lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wasn't an option. Her mind was spinning, replaying everything. Keaton, her mother, the threat. She turned over, trying to push it all away. Then, bang, a loud noise outside. Nova bolted upright. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Another bang, closer this time. She scrambled to the window and peeked through the blinds. A shadow moved near the street. A figure, barely visible in the dim light. Nova's breath hitched. Then, crack, something hit her window. She yelped, stumbling backward. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She grabbed her phone and texted Jaden. Nova, someone's outside. His reply was instant. Jaden, what? Stay inside. Lock your door. Nova crept toward her bedroom door, locking it with shaky hands. Her mind raced. Was it Keaton? No. He was too careful to get caught doing something illegal. Then who? Another bang echoed outside. Nova's stomach twisted. Jaden's next text came in. Jaden, I'm coming over. Nova, no. It's too dangerous. Jaden, like I care. Nova's grip on her phone tightened. Then, silence. No more banging. No more movement. Just eerie, suffocating silence. Her phone vibrated again. Jaden, I'm almost there. Nova swallowed hard. She peeked out the window one more time. The street was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. For now. 10 minutes later, Jaden knocked on her door. Nova yanked it open, barely giving him a chance to step inside before she locked it behind him. He looked her up and down, his brows furrowed. You okay? Nova let out a shaky breath. Yeah. He didn't look convinced. What happened? She told him everything. The noises, the shadow, the object hitting her window. Jaden swore under his breath. Someone's trying to scare you. Nova nodded. And it's working. Jaden's eyes darkened. We should go to the judge. Nova hesitated. Not yet. Jaden groaned. Nova, if we tell him now, Keaton will just say I'm making it up for sympathy. Jaden dragged a hand down his face. So what? You just wait until something worse happens. Nova looked away. Jaden sighed. Okay, fine. But I'm staying here tonight. Nova blinked. What? You heard me. He crossed his arms. I'm not leaving you alone when someone's out there messing with you. Nova opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Because the truth was, she didn't want to be alone. She sighed. Fine. Jaden grinned. See? That wasn't so hard. She rolled her eyes but couldn't fight the small smile on her lips. Maybe she wasn't alone in this after all. But deep down she knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. Nova barely slept that night. Even with Jaden in the next room, the fear didn't fade. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the bangs, saw the shadow outside her window. By morning, exhaustion clung to her, but she shoved it aside. She had bigger things to worry about. Court was in 2 hours, and she had no idea what Keaton was planning next. Jaden was already awake when she stepped into the kitchen. He handed her a granola bar. Eat. Nova took it, but just stared at it. Not hungry. You didn't sleep, did you? She sighed. Not really. Jaden ran a hand through his curls. You're gonna crash if you don't take care of yourself. I'll crash if I lose this case, she muttered. Jaden frowned. You're not gonna lose. Nova wished she had his confidence. But Keaton was playing dirty. He had already used her mother against her. And now, someone was trying to scare her into giving up. She needed to be ready. Jaden nudged her. We should get to court early. Just in case Keaton tries something. Nova nodded. Yeah, let's go. The courthouse was busier than usual. The media had caught wind of Nova's case, and now cameras lined the steps. Reporters shouted questions as she walked past. Miss Daniels, is it true your own mother testified against you? Do you have anything to say about the threats against you? Are you planning to take the plea deal? Nova kept her head down, ignoring them. But inside, her blood boiled. They didn't care about the truth. They wanted a story. Jaden touched her arm, guiding her inside. Breathe. She did. Barely. Inside the courtroom, Keaton was already seated at the prosecution's table. He looked up as she walked in, smirking like he had already won. Nova clenched her fists. Not today. Judge Simmons entered, and the room settled. Let's continue, he said. Mr. Keaton, do you have any new evidence to present? Keaton stood. I do, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to introduce surveillance footage from the night of the incident. Nova's stomach dropped. What? She shot a look at her public defender. He looked just as blindsided as she felt. Footage? Judge Simmons asked, raising an eyebrow. Keaton nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Security camera footage from a nearby store. It captures Miss Daniels at the scene, standing near the firearm in question. Nova's mind spun. She had been at the scene, but she never touched the gun. If Keaton had a video, was he twisting the footage to make her look guilty? Judge Simmons sighed. Very well. Let's see it. Keaton gestured to the bailiff, who set up a screen. Nova's pulse pounded as the footage played. The grainy black and white video showed the street outside the corner store. The fight was already in progress. Two figures, Jaden and the other boy, were yelling at each other. Then, Nova appeared. She ran toward them. The video showed her grabbing Jaden's wrist, the moment she stopped him from pulling the gun. Nova held her breath. The gun fell to the ground. And then, the police arrived. The footage cut off. The courtroom was silent. Nova's heart pounded. Keaton cleared his throat. As you can see, Your Honor, the defendant was directly involved. While she may not have held the weapon for long, she was in possession of it, even if only momentarily. That alone is enough to warrant the charge. Nova's eyes widened. That's his argument? Judge Simmons steepled his fingers. Miss Daniels, do you have a response? Nova's mind raced. She needed to be smart. She took a deep breath. Your Honor, what you just saw was not possession, she said firmly. That footage shows me stopping a fight. It shows me preventing gun violence, not committing a crime. Keaton folded his arms. Miss Daniels, you made physical contact with the firearm. Even if only briefly, that still classifies as possession under the law. Nova's pulse pounded. No, it doesn't. Judge Simmons raised an eyebrow. Explain. Nova's confidence sharpened. She knew this. The law states that possession requires knowledge, intent, and control, she said. I had none of those. I never intended to have that gun. I never controlled it. I only acted to stop someone from using it. Keaton's smirk faltered. Nova pressed on. If stopping a fight counts as possession, then any teacher breaking up a fight at school should be charged too. But that's not how the law works. Judge Simmons tapped his gavel lightly. An interesting argument. Nova wasn't done. Also, Your Honor, the footage conveniently cuts off before the police arrived. Why is that? She turned to Keaton. Did the store only provide you with part of the footage? Or did you edit out the part where I was wrongfully arrested before I could explain myself? Keaton's jaw tightened. Nova pressed. I'd like to request the full video, Your Honor. Judge Simmons nodded. That's a fair request. Mr. Keaton, can the prosecution provide the unedited footage? Keaton hesitated, just for a second. And that was all Nova needed. He didn't have it. Or worse, he had it, but it didn't support his case. Judge Simmons sighed. Until we have the full video, I'm not considering this footage as reliable evidence. Nova exhaled slowly. She won that round. Keaton sat down, his expression tight. For the first time, he looked rattled. But Nova knew he wasn't done. And she was right. Because just as Judge Simmons was about to adjourn, Keaton stood back up. Your Honor, if I may, he said smoothly. Judge Simmons raised an eyebrow. What now, Mr. Keaton? Keaton smiled. And Nova knew. This was the real trap. The prosecution has one final witness, Keaton announced. The doors opened. A man in a dark suit walked in. He looked familiar. Too familiar. And then Nova realized. It was the cop who arrested her. Her breath caught. Keaton smiled. Your Honor, Officer Mitchell will testify about the defendant's behavior that night. Nova's blood ran cold. Because she already knew what was coming. And it was another lie. Nova's heart pounded as Officer Mitchell walked to the witness stand. His uniform was crisp, his expression blank, but his eyes, were filled with something she recognized. Control. This wasn't just about the case. This was about power. Judge Simmons sighed, rubbing his temple. Mr. Keaton, I certainly hope this isn't another attempt at showboating. Keaton smirked. Not at all, Your Honor. Officer Mitchell was the arresting officer that night. His testimony is crucial. Nova clenched her fists. The same officer who had shoved her to the ground without asking questions. The same officer who ignored her when she tried to explain. And now, he was here to lie. Judge Simmons motioned for Keaton to proceed. Keaton turned to Mitchell. Officer, can you describe what you saw the night of the incident? Mitchell adjusted his collar. Yes, sir. When we arrived on the scene, we witnessed a physical altercation. Two young men were engaged in a fight, and Miss Daniels was standing over a firearm. Nova's jaw tightened. That was partly true, but the way he framed it made her sound guilty. Keaton nodded. And what was her reaction when you intervened? Mitchell glanced at Nova before speaking. Hostile. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Nova shot to her feet. That's a lie. Judge Simmons banged his gavel. Miss Daniels, control yourself. Nova's hands trembled, but she sat down. She could not lose her temper. Keaton pretended to look sympathetic. Officer, can you elaborate on what you mean by hostile? Mitchell nodded. When we instructed Miss Daniels to get on the ground, she hesitated. She kept talking, refusing to comply. We had to use force to detain her safely. Nova's blood boiled. He made it sound like she resisted. Jaden leaned close, whispering, "He's twisting it." Nova knew that. But how could she prove it? Keaton continued. Did Miss Daniels say anything that indicated she was aware of the firearm? Mitchell hesitated, just for a second. Then he nodded. She said, "Wait, before she went down." To me, that sounded like she was about to admit something. Gasps rippled through the room. Nova's heart slammed against her ribs. Judge Simmons leaned forward. "Miss Daniels, is that true?" Nova's pulse pounded. "Yes, but not how he's making it sound." Keaton folded his arms. "Sounds like a confession to me." Nova shot up again. "It wasn't." Judge Simmons sighed. "Miss Daniels, you'll get your turn." Nova's fists clenched. She had to stay calm. But Keaton wasn't finished. "One last question, officer," he said, voice smooth. "In your professional opinion, did Miss Daniels' actions indicate guilt?" Mitchell nodded. "Absolutely." And just like that, the courtroom erupted. Nova felt her world tilting. Her own arrest was now evidence against her. Judge Simmons banged his gavel. "Order. I will not have chaos in my courtroom." The murmurs died down. Keaton smiled. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Simmons sighed. "Defense, cross-examination?" Nova's public defender hesitated. Yes, Your Honor." But Nova stood first. "I'd like to question the witness." Her lawyer paled. "Nova, no." Judge Simmons eyed her. "Miss Daniels, you are not an attorney." Nova lifted her chin. "I know the law." Judge Simmons hesitated. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "You may proceed. But be careful." Nova exhaled. This was it. She turned to Mitchell, staring him down. "Officer, how long were you at the scene before you arrested me?" Mitchell blinked. "A few minutes." Nova folded her arms. "More specifically?" Mitchell hesitated. "Less than 2. Nova turned to the judge. "Your Honor, 2 minutes is not enough time for an officer to properly assess a situation before making an arrest." Judge Simmons raised an eyebrow. "Continue." Nova turned back to Mitchell. "You said I was hostile. But did I ever physically resist arrest?" Mitchell stiffened. "You hesitated." Nova's eyes narrowed. "Did I fight back? Did I push you? Did I do anything that required you to use force?" Mitchell's jaw twitched. "No." Nova let that sit for a second. Then she took a step forward. "You also said I stood over a firearm. Did I ever touch it?" Mitchell hesitated again. And that second of silence was all Nova needed. "I'll repeat the question," she said. "Did I ever touch the firearm?" Mitchell exhaled sharply. "Not that I saw." The courtroom gasped. Nova pounced. "So you arrested me based on assumptions?" Mitchell's face darkened. "It was reasonable suspicion." Nova didn't let up. "And what made that suspicion reasonable? Was it because I was standing near a gun? Or because I was a black teenager standing near a gun?" The courtroom exploded. Judge Simmons banged his gavel furiously. "Order! Order!" Keaton's face turned to stone. Mitchell looked furious, but he didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Nova turned to Judge Simmons, her voice steady. "Your Honor, this officer made a biased arrest. He never saw me touch the gun. He never asked what happened. He saw me and decided I was guilty." Judge Simmons let out a slow breath. "Officer Mitchell," he said, "I'm beginning to question your credibility." Mitchell's face turned red. "Your Honor." Judge Simmons held up a hand. "I've heard enough. You may step down." Mitchell clenched his jaw, but obeyed. Nova let out a shaky breath. She had won that round. But Keaton wasn't done. He stood. "Your Honor, despite the witness's credibility issues, the fact remains that Miss Daniels was involved in a dangerous altercation." Judge Simmons nodded slowly. "And yet, you have no concrete proof that she intended to commit a crime." Keaton's jaw twitched. Nova could see it now. He was losing control. Judge Simmons sighed. "I need time to review this case further. Court is adjourned until tomorrow." Bang. The gavel came down. Nova's knees almost buckled. Jaden grabbed her arm. "Nova, you killed that." She exhaled sharply. "I don't know." Jaden frowned. "What do you mean?" "You exposed that cop." Nova shook her head. "Keaton isn't done. He's got something else." Jaden's excitement faded. "You really think so?" Nova looked at Keaton. He wasn't smirking anymore. But he wasn't panicking either. And that terrified her. "Yeah," she whispered. "I do." Because if there was one thing Nova Daniels knew, a man like Keaton didn't lose without a backup plan. And whatever it was It was going to be worse than anything before. Nova barely made it outside before her knees gave out. Jaden caught her just in time, steadying her as they stepped away from the courthouse. Nova, breathe. She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to stay upright. Her body felt like it was running on fumes. The adrenaline was fading, and exhaustion was crashing over her like a wave. I need to sit, she murmured. Jaden guided her to a bench. That was intense. Nova let out a hollow laugh. Understatement of the century. Jaden studied her. You okay? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to act like she had everything under control. But she didn't. She had won a battle today, but Keaton wasn't finished. She knew it. And that scared her more than anything. I don't know, she admitted. Jaden exhaled. That cop was lying through his teeth. You tore him apart in there. Nova shook her head. Keaton knew I would. That's why he let me. It was a distraction. Jaden frowned. Distraction from what? Nova clenched her jaw. I don't know. But she was going to find out. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she studied. She read through every legal document related to her case. She looked up past trials Keaton had worked on. She combed through police reports, searching for anything she might have missed. And at 2 a.m., she found it. Her stomach turned. She grabbed her phone and texted Jaden. Nova, I figured it out. I know what Keaton's planning. His response was instant. Jaden, tell me. Nova, he's bringing in a new witness. Someone who's going to lie about me. Jaden, how do you know? Nova hesitated. Then, she sent him a screenshot, an internal court document she had somehow accessed. Jaden, Nova, how did you even get this? Nova, you don't want to know. She definitely wasn't going to tell him she had hacked into a public legal database. Jaden didn't press. Jaden, so who's the witness? Nova stared at the name on the document, her heart sinking. She didn't recognize it. But that didn't mean it wasn't dangerous. Nova, someone named Devin Carter. Jaden paused. Then, his response came in. Jaden, Nova, I know who that is. Nova sat up straighter. Nova who? Jaden, he's a guy from school. He hangs with some bad people. Nova's fingers tightened around her phone. So Keaton was bringing in a street witness? Someone who could say anything about her? Her chest tightened. She needed to get ahead of this. Nova, I need to talk to him before court. Jaden, that's a bad idea. Nova, it's my only shot. Jaden sent a string of curse words. Then, Jaden, fine. I'll help you find him. But if this goes south, we run. Got it. Nova, got it. But deep down, she knew. They might be too late. Because Keaton wasn't just trying to beat her in court anymore. He was trying to break her. And she had no idea if she was strong enough to stop him. The next morning, Nova and Jaden met outside an old basketball court near the school. It was early, too early for most people to be out. But Devin Carter was already there, leaning against the fence, waiting. Nova's stomach twisted. Jaden muttered, bad feeling about this. Nova swallowed. Same. They approached cautiously. Devin smirked when he saw them. Well, look who's desperate. Nova crossed her arms. Cut the act. I know Keaton's using you. Devin laughed. Is that what you think? Nova's eyes narrowed. I think Keaton needed someone to lie about me. And he picked you. Devin shrugged. Maybe. Maybe not. Jaden took a step forward. Dude, you know she didn't do anything. Why are you helping Keaton? Devin's smirk faltered. Just for a second. Then he sighed. Because I don't have a choice. Nova frowned. What do you mean? Devin glanced around, lowering his voice. Keaton didn't ask me to testify. He forced me. Nova's heart stopped. What? Devin exhaled sharply. He found out I have priors. Said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure I went away for good. Nova's stomach twisted. So Keaton was threatening witnesses now? Jaden cursed. Man, that's messed up. Devin looked away. I know. Nova hesitated. Then don't do it, she said. Tell the truth. Devin let out a bitter laugh. You don't get it. If I don't testify, Keaton will ruin me. If I do testify, I just have to say a few words, and he'll cut me loose. Nova clenched her fists. And those few words will destroy my life. Devin finally met her gaze. And she saw it. The guilt. The fear. He didn't want to do this. But Keaton had backed him into a corner. Jaden shook his head. Man, there has to be another way. Devin exhaled. If there is, I don't see it. Nova's mind raced. Keaton thought he had her trapped. But maybe she could trap him. She took a deep breath. I have an idea. Devin and Jaden both turned to her. Nova's heart pounded. If this worked, she could flip Keaton's plan against him. But if it failed, She was done. She exhaled. We're going to use Keaton's own witness to take him down. And just like that, everything changed. Nova had always been a strategist. She saw the world like a chessboard. Every move had a consequence. Every opponent had a weakness. And Keaton? He thought he had backed her into a corner. He thought he had won. But he had made a mistake. He had forced Devon to testify. And now? Nova was going to use that against him. Devon frowned. You want me to turn on Keaton? Are you crazy? Nova shook her head. No. I'm thinking ahead. Jaden crossed his arms. Nova, you sure about this? Nova exhaled. If we expose Keaton for forcing witnesses to lie, his case falls apart. She turned to Devon. And if you help us, you walk away clean. Devon hesitated. And if I don't? Nova's eyes hardened. Then you help a corrupt prosecutor send an innocent person to jail. And trust me, Keaton won't stop with just me. He'll come for you next. Devon's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. Jaden nudged him. Dude, you don't owe Keaton anything. But you do owe yourself a chance to be free. Devon swallowed. His hands curled into fists. Then, all right, he muttered. I'll do it. Nova's heart pounded. She had him. Now, she just had to win. Court felt different that day. The tension was thicker. The air felt charged. And Nova knew why. Keaton had no idea what was coming. She sat at the defense table, her hands steady, her heartbeat strong. Judge Simmons entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Let's continue, he said. Mr. Keaton, call your next witness. Keaton stood, his smirk firmly in place. The prosecution calls Devon Carter to the stand. The bailiff opened the door, and Devon walked in. Nova watched him closely. This was it. He took his oath and sat down. Keaton approached, confidence radiating off him. Mr. Carter, do you know the defendant? Devon hesitated. Then he nodded. Yeah. Keaton clasped his hands behind his back. And in your experience, would you say Miss Daniels is involved in criminal activity? Nova held her breath. Devon exhaled. Then, actually, he said slowly, I want to talk about you, Mr. Keaton. The entire courtroom gasped. Keaton's smirk vanished. Excuse me, he said sharply. Devon sat up straighter. His voice was clear, strong. Keaton forced me to testify. He threatened me. Said if I didn't lie about Nova, he'd make sure I got locked up. A shockwave ripped through the courtroom. Nova's pulse raced. She had won. Keaton's face darkened. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Judge Simmons raised a hand. Mr. Carter, are you saying the prosecution coerced your testimony? Devon nodded. Yes, sir. And I have proof. Nova's stomach flipped. Proof? Devon pulled his phone from his pocket. I recorded him. The courtroom erupted. Judge Simmons banged his gavel. Order. Order in this court. Nova couldn't breathe. Devon had recorded Keaton? Keaton was finished. The judge sighed. Mr. Carter, please submit that recording as evidence. The bailiff took the phone. Keaton's face was pale. For the first time, he looked afraid. Judge Simmons turned to him, his voice sharp. Mr. Keaton, I strongly suggest you choose your next words carefully. Keaton opened his mouth, then closed it. He had nothing. Nova felt the weight of the moment. She had done it. She had exposed him. Judge Simmons leaned back. Given this revelation, I will not be allowing any further prosecution testimony until this matter is investigated. His gaze landed on Nova. Miss Daniels, you may remain free pending further review of your case. Nova's breath hitched. Did that mean? The gavel slammed down. Case adjourned. The room exploded into noise. Jaden grabbed Nova's arm, his eyes wide. Nova, you did it. She exhaled, her entire body shaking. But she wasn't scared anymore. She had won. And Keaton? Keaton was finished. But as she turned to leave, she caught one last glimpse of him. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at someone else. A man in a dark suit, standing in the back of the courtroom. A man Nova had never seen before. And the way he looked at her? Cold. Calculated. Like this wasn't over. Nova's stomach twisted. She had won the battle. But the war wasn't over yet. Nova should have felt relieved. She should have walked out of that courtroom with her head high, knowing she had beaten Keaton at his own game. But as she stepped into the hallway, the victory felt hollow. Jaden nudged her. Nova, we won. Why do you look like you just lost? Nova turned, her eyes searching the crowd. Did you see him? Jaden frowned. See who? The man in the back, she whispered. Jaden followed her gaze, but the stranger was gone. Nova's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. She had taken down Keaton, but the way he had looked at that man before leaving? That wasn't defeat. That was something else. Something worse. Jaden sighed. Nova, you're overthinking. Keaton's done. You won. Nova wanted to believe that, but she knew better. The next day, she expected to see her name in the news. She expected people to talk about how she had outsmarted Keaton, how a teenager had defended herself against the system. But instead, the headlines read, Prosecutor Matthew Keaton resigns amid corruption allegations. Nova blinked at the screen. Resigned? Just like that? Jaden texted her. Jaden, something doesn't feel right. Nova's hands tightened around her phone. Keaton was powerful. If he had been fired, arrested, publicly humiliated, she would have believed it. But resigning? That meant someone had let him walk away. And that scared her more than anything. A week passed. Nova tried to move on. Tried to forget the fear, the betrayal, the fight. Tried to remember what it felt like to just be a kid. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. It started with little things. A black car parked outside her apartment for hours. A man in a suit lingering too long at the coffee shop. Her teachers whispering when she walked by. And then, the letter arrived. She found it in her locker. No name. No return address. Just a single sentence typed in bold letters. You should have taken the deal. Nova's hands went cold. This wasn't over. Keaton was gone. But the system that created him? The people behind him? They were still there. And they had noticed her. Jaden found her outside after school, sitting on the steps, staring at the letter. He took one look at her face and frowned. Nova, what is it? She handed him the note. Jaden's face darkened. Who sent this? Nova exhaled slowly. I don't know. Jaden cursed. This isn't normal. They're messing with you. Nova looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Or they're testing me. Jaden blinked. Testing you for what? Nova stood, shoving the letter into her pocket. For whatever comes next. Because she knew this wasn't the end. She had cracked the system once. And now? Now, the system was watching her. Waiting. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready for it.